Welcome to Photography BB's Artistry Effects for Photoshop. In this tutorial, we'll look at how to use our CyberSketch effect. Let's jump on into Photoshop and see how to use this dynamic effect. This effect comes in two different orientation template files. There's a landscape orientation file as seen here on the screen, and there's also a portrait orientation file for the taller images. To use this template and get your photo into the template and run the effect, it's very easy. All you have to do is double-click on the top layer thumbnail. So not on the layer text here or not on the layer itself. We want to double-click on the thumbnail right here, and that will open up a Smart Object layer. So as you can see here, there's a new tab up on the top of the screen here, which is our Smart Object layer, and this is where we're going to put our own photo. So to do that, we go to the menu File, and then Place Embedded, and then choose a photo that you would like to work with. And for this tutorial, I'm going to use this photo right here and just say Place. So that brings your image into the template, and then there's these anchor points where you can drag your image and resize it to fit your template. So when you fit your image to the template the way that you would like it, just place the image by clicking on the little check mark here, and that finalizes the placing of the image. So now what we want to do with this effect, we do need to extract our main subject away from its background. So we want to remove the background entirely. If you're using Photoshop CC, the easiest way to do this is go to the menu window and then activate the contextual taskbar, which I have opened down here. So make your subject layer active in the layers palette here, and then click on Remove Background, and Photoshop does a wonderful job of removing the image background. You can see it's made a mask here. So you could do the masking manually if you don't have Photoshop CC, or if you do have Photoshop CC, you can use this quick and easy feature. Now, the last thing we need to do before we run the effect is to hide this default layer here, which is just the default text. So we're going to turn the visibility off, and here we can see we have our subject extracted from the background. Now, to run this effect, all we need to do is click on the little X to close the Smart Object layer, and we are going to save it, and that will run the effect automatically. So click Save, and here we go. Okay, and this template has now run the CyberSketch effect. This effect does have a lot of different controls that we can go through right here for optional refinements. So let's take a look at some of them right here. So the first layer group that we have is the tone controls. And this really just sets the contrast and brightness and saturation of the image as a whole, so the subject and the background. If we toggle that open, we can see we have a brightness and contrast layer, and you can double click on any of the adjustment layer icons to bring up further controls for that. So we might want to increase the contrast a little bit here. Looks good. Hue saturation layer. So here we can have some fun with shifting colors around. We can colorize the image, or we can make it black and white. And curves, levels, these set the contrast of the image as well. You can see here we have some brightness and contrast, and the exposure as well. You can raise or lower the exposure by double-clicking that and changing some of the settings here. So I encourage you to experiment with some of the options in the tone controls layer group, but we have set the default to the effect the way that I envisioned it when I created it. Next, we have the sketch layers. So we can toggle this open, and we will have a number of different groups inside the sketch layers group. So we have these sketch lines, and if I turn this layer group off, you'll see that it removes all of these sort of neon dynamic cyberpunk style lines right here. We have control over these lines as well. We can open up the sketch lines group by toggling that open. And you can see each one, we have the line color for sketch lines 1, the line color for sketch lines 2, and so on here. Now I'd like to make a quick note that you can see this color layer here has a little arrow pointing down to the layer under it. This is something called a clipping mask in Photoshop, and clipping masks are very useful. So what it does is it basically constrains the top layer to the shape of the bottom layer. And the way you activate a clipping mask is you hover your mouse or your cursor in between the two layers while holding down the Alt or Option key, and you'll see that icon changes right here. So if we want to unclip it from this layer, you'll see that we just have a solid color. Now it's in the multiply blend mode right now, but if I just change it to normal, all this is a solid color layer. But when we clip it down to the shape of this layer here, and if I hold the Alt or Option key and click on the visibility of this layer, I can see just this layer by itself. So that's what this layer looks like right here. That white squiggly line is the data on this layer. So if I'm clipping the line color to that line, so what it's doing is it's constraining the top layer color to the shape that's underneath it right here. Now I wanted it to show just on that white squiggly line that we saw earlier. If I show you that again. And the way we do that is we use the multiply blend mode. And there you can see now it's just constrained it to that squiggly line that I had. So you can play around with these. It's not necessary to change any of them, but you can change the color by double clicking on the color swatch, and you can see that we can choose, let's just go to something completely different. And you can see how this green line, that's the one we're changing right here. We can make it blue. And we can just play with that. So that's clipping masks and the sketch lines here. And you can play with all of the sketch line colors to your liking. There's 4 different layers of sketch line, and it just adds like a dynamic, sort of energetic look to the image. So we can close up the sketch lines layer group right here. And next we move down to the color highlights. So if we toggle that one open, we do have a highlight color, and this will show up differently on every image, will look a little bit different. So if I toggle the color highlights layer group on and off, you can see it's having some effect on the eyes and just around the edges of some of the details here. And once again, you can double click on the highlight color to change that to something else. You can make it green. Let's go bold and go red. So you can play with that. And again, it'll look different on your image versus this one here. So that's the color highlights. It's just a very small, simple layer group, but it adds a nice little detail to the image. And if you find it's too strong, of course, click the color highlights layer group to select it, and then you can reduce the opacity to bring down the effect. And now next we have the crosshatch effect here. So if I zoom in on the image a little bit, you're going to see this sort of crosshatch sketch area showing up in the brighter parts of the image. So if we open that up here, you can see we have a crosshatch texture, and it is just clipped to the crosshatch layer group layer that I have underneath. So again, it's just constraining this texture. If we just look at this layer by itself, that's what it looks like right there. It's just a bunch of crosshatches, which I made with a brush, and I just clipped it to this layer right here, which only contains the highlights in our subject, in our main subject. So now if we go back to everything, you can see it's showing up here. It's showing up in the background here because it's not clipped, right? So it's not constrained to any area when it's not clipped to the layer under it. You can see it's showing up everywhere. So if I clip it to the layer underneath, there we go. It's constrained to the area of our image. And I've made it only show up in the white areas by using the darken blend mode. And you can play with all sorts of blend modes to get different effects, but darken is the one that we're going with here to have it just show up in the white areas of your photo. So again, you don't need to go in here and play around with this too much. It's basically whether you want the crosshatch effect on or off. You would turn on and off the visibility of this layer, or you can reduce the opacity of that layer group as well. Just gives a nice sketch look, and it will be different on every image that you're working with. And lastly, we have the base layers for this image, and if we toggle that open, we have some fine lines effects here, which are just a detail that, again, sort of adds an energetic, dynamic look to the image. We have the halftone texture, so I can zoom in a lot here, and you can see this sort of comic book halftone texture, which gives it a very illustrated, artistic look. And you can play around with that as well. If you like it, but it's too strong, you can lower the opacity of that down, and you can still have the effect, but not quite as strong. And of course, the main subject base is our main subject, so we don't need to change that at all. So let's close up the base layers and move on to one of the most fun layer groups, which is the background options layer group. So I have designed 7 different backgrounds with a cyberpunk-inspired feel to them for this effect. So this is the default one that's on right now, number 1. We can turn that off completely. We just have a colored background, which is down at the very bottom, and you can change the color of that background by just clicking on the swatch and choosing another color. But let's go through some of these. So we had that one, that's the default. We can add some interesting lights with this one here. And another thing you can do, like for example, I like this one, but I find that the background lighting is a little bit too harsh. So we can click that layer to make it active, and let's lower the opacity down. That looks pretty cool. I think that looks better than before. So let's turn the visibility off and move on to the next one. We have sort of a cloud smoke sort of image right here. We have sort of dusty or space-like star image right here. We have another one here, which is a modern, like a circuit board type of image. And we have a sketched background texture. And lastly, this one is kind of fun. It was an anime-inspired background sketch that I put together here. So you can have a lot of fun, as you can see, with these different layer groups. So I hope you have fun experimenting with this effect and creating some really dynamic, beautiful artwork with your photos. Thanks again for choosing Artistry Effects by Photography BB, and happy photoshopping.